Hello and welcome to our web chat on optimizing the cash forecasting process. It's a series we're doing with Cashforce, and we're joined by Nicolas Christiaen, managing partner of Cashforce, one of the leading working capital suppliers who help their clients improve their cash flow forecasting practices and systems. In this mini web chat, we are going to be examining understanding your working capital drivers. And you have, Nicola, 6 basic steps that you suggest, and I'll ask you to talk about it in a minute, but is this sequence always the same in every company?
So this is the 6 steps that we as Cashforce consolidated from actually working with many clients on the subject of cash flow forecasting. And so they're basically consolidated from all of our experiences. Now, in any circumstance that you get into, of course, you need to evaluate if these are the steps to follow. I actually walk through the 6 of them very quickly. The idea is basically the first step is we want to understand the working capital drivers. Now, working capital is only a set of transactions, so we need to look a bit broader to the cash flow drivers, so all of the different cash flows within the company, and understand what's happening. And that's important before you ever go forecasting. In the third step, we define the cash flow forecasting horizons, short-term, mid-term, long-term. And in the fourth step, we define what sources we should link to each of those terms. In the fifth steps, we're going to integrate, consolidate data, so that makes sense for each of those different time horizons. And in the sixth step, we're going to define logics. So basically not only consolidating data, but they're also defining logics that makes these assumptions count on top of the data.
In this web chat, we're going to focus our time on the first step, understanding your working capital drivers.
Why do we focus first on that? Very simply put, if you talk about working capital, we actually look at all order to cash, forecast to fulfill, purchase to pay transactions. And this is actually the majority of the transactions within any company. For us, that's absolutely crucial to understand that first before ever going to talk about cash flow forecasting.
Give us a short demo on how you help companies understand their working capital drivers.
Effectively, we're now looking at what we call a working capital dashboard. But from that dashboard, we will be able to zoom in into the different drivers, if you will, of that working capital. Once you look at the dashboard, you'll typically identify 3 columns. So order to cash, forecast to fulfill, purchase to pay, with all of its relevant KPIs, and in total the cash conversion cycle with the total working capital being displayed here. Now, if you look at this result, it's a consolidated result. So basically it can be split up in all of the different legal entities, regions, sections, business units, and so on. And with that, I'm typically selecting a set of regions, a set of entities, and you will see actually the dashboard drills down to the effective working capital level, to the effective performance in these cycles for my selection.
How do you get the data in the first place?
Good question. So in the background, of course, with this short demo, we don't have too much time to explain, but in the background, all of the ERP information, accounting information is drawn up from the ERP and accounting systems such as SAP, Oracle, and others, and drawn directly into the model, the data model that fits underneath this dashboard. And that's done by our what we call off-the-shelf connectors to these ERP systems.
And what about the manual input, the non-automated ERP entries?
So when we talk about working capital, we typically are looking at what are receivables, payables, what's sitting in our inventory. So that typically we track from system-based sources. So this would be typically coming from ERP and accounting-based systems. Only if there are really small entities without having even such an ERP and accounting system, we could as well have input from Excel sheets, spreadsheets, or small databases inside the system as well. To let me explain the drivers behind the working capital, the idea is basically that we get an idea of the working capital, we get an idea of what we should have as working capital, meaning if all customers would pay on time, if we would have a perfect timing to pay our vendors, and if we would have an ideal inventory. But you'll obviously see we were not even close to that number. And this is because we have excess receivables, excess stock, and we're doing okay on the payable side. So what do we advise in terms of understanding working capital drivers is that we now can drill down, understand that DSO, understand that it's not only about literally the financial working capital, but there is also what we call the hidden DSO. So the time it takes to process orders, the time it takes to get that orders to the door at the client, and then getting that order being invoiced. That, of course, gives a delay as well, and will have a lasting impact on the cash flow forecast at a later stage. When we drill down into the DSO, we come to the accounts receivable dashboard. Once we are here, we see again the 54 days, and then basically the historic DSO over time. And from now on, we can drill down, understand that DSO per company. When we drill down on a certain company, which we'd like to investigate, we can drill down on the drivers per segment, and then really drill down to the individual customers underneath until we found a set of customers that is out of line and that we want to investigate. And we can identify literally the detailed drivers, the detailed underlying invoices, credit notes that we need to literally get into to understand our working capital drivers. And that's just what I would like to say in terms of cash flow forecasting, a very important step that you can understand literally from high level to low level, what exactly is driving certain parts of your working capital.
It's also a management tool during the process itself.
Correct. As you can see, it can be used by managers that want to basically report on certain metrics, but it can also be used to basically incentivize people to work towards a certain results. And I'm giving you the example of sales managers, which are sales organizations, which are typically being incentivized on DSO figures, payment behavior. So this is the type of information that they would need to basically follow up the right customers with the right information. And that's what you typically see in organizations. Not having this information, building this in Excel costs a lot of time, and that's not the time that you want to spend with your customer trying to understand why he's paying late and trying to understand how to influence his behavior.
The cash flow forecasting process is managing working capital across the whole process. It doesn't just start at the end. The working capital management is all the way through. Is that how you see it?
Absolutely. So I think cash flow forecasting and working capital is very much interconnected with each other. And I think it's something that we've been seeing the last couple of years when the I would say, hardcore classic treasury approach was to look at a total different way in terms of cash flow forecasting than I would say today's way of looking at it. Today, we look at how can we from working capital transactions literally work our way to a better cash flow forecast. So it's literally interconnected